Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're going to go over a few cards that are currently trending because of some more rogue decks in the game right now. With everyone waiting for a ban list, a lot of players are of course turning to some more fun strategies to bring to their locals and such, but those trends are still very important for us to pay attention to because those trends are still going to cause buyouts and price spikes that we need to be aware of. Let's get started. Alright, now kicking things off, we're looking at Arch Nemesis Protos. So this is a card that was banned for a couple of years there, as it was a really strong card in the Sword Soul deck. It was unbanned a couple of lists ago, and players seemed to think that the card would somehow make Sword Soul relevant again, but it never really found its way into the format. However, the card is now starting to come up once again in the Ritual Beast deck. I believe that what players do is they use 2 level 4 monsters to make Infernal Flame Banshee and search for Nemesis Flag, who can then search for Protos. And of course, if you can call the correct attribute with Protos, you should be able to lock your opponent out of the game completely and then win on the following turn. Now with Protos, this card was obviously hyped when it was unbanned, but once players saw that it wasn't seeing play, it did tank in price. Up until fairly recently, it had been sitting at around the $25 to $30 mark each. However, with the sudden interest in the card once again, we've seen it jump back up to the $40 mark. The difficult thing is that Protos still has just one printing as an ultra rare from back in Eternity Code, which is a fairly old set now, so a copy of this card is going to be pretty difficult to come across. That said, this still isn't something that I'd be holding on to too many copies of, as it's very likely to be reprinted in one of the upcoming reprint sets, maybe in something like the 2024 tins. Hopefully, you didn't miss the window offloading this right after it got unbanned, but if you did and you're still holding on to a copy or two, now is probably a great time to dump it once again. Up next, we do have a card that is somewhat meta relevant. It's Rise to Full Height. So this is a normal trap card, but we really just care about this card for its graveyard effect. You can banish it to target a monster that you control, and then monsters your opponent controls can't attack unless they're attacking that monster. So over in the OCG, this card has emerged as a card to send directly to the graveyard with Beatrice, who is accessible in most strategies thanks to the Fiendsmith engine. The idea is that you can basically save yourself the game, or at least stop yourself from losing the game that turn, since if the monster that you target leaves the field, your opponent can't attack it anymore, but they still can't attack you directly either, so you definitely get a turn next turn so that you can try and push back for damage. It's a cool trick. Even though it does seem a little bit gimmicky, I could definitely see it being a useful option, especially going into something like Time. So with this card, it doesn't actually have any holo printings, it just has 3 different common versions. Strangely enough, all of those printings are starting to trend upwards. They're around $1 to $2 each, with relatively low quantities available on TCG Player. This may not seem like a lot, but it is still pretty high for just a one-of that also had a structure deck printing and they're just commons. Then again, its last printing was back in 2018, so it's going to be a bit more difficult of a common to find. Obviously, if Beatrice gets banned or if this card gets a holo upgrade, then these won't be worth anything anymore, but I would definitely dig through your bulk to try and find a few copies of this card and offload them for some free value while you can. So this one was certainly unexpected, but we're now looking at Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon. Now Blue Eyes is always going to be a fan favorite deck thanks to the anime, and the Ritual Chaos version is one of the simpler yet more consistent versions to play. Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon is a 4,000 attack point beater that can't be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and it also inflicts double piercing damage to your opponent. I believe that there are some Blue Eyes builds that actually try to ritual summon out Chaos Max Dragon and win the game with it right away. However, the new card that we just got in Terminal Revenge, called Dragon Master Magia, actually provides a way to cheat Chaos Max Dragon straight out of the deck, which is pretty cool. The other thing is that apparently we are getting a Blue Eyes structure deck in the OCG later this year, and I believe that players are hoping that between Dragon Master Magia and Chaos Max Dragon, the deck should be able to do some really cool things, possibly be meta relevant, as well as make use of these existing cards. Now that said, the secret rare version of Chaos Max is the highest, so it has shot up a crazy amount, and they're now sitting between $20 and $25 for a single copy. Fortunately, the card does have a few other different versions available. It got the colored ultra rare printings from I think Legendary Duelist Season 2, and then it also had ultra and gold rare printings from the movie pack. Any of those different versions is going to cost you around $3 to $5 now. That's a huge gap from the secret rare though, so if you don't mind playing in the lower rarities, I'd definitely try to offload the secrets while they are still hyped up, and just play with the ultras if you really want to. Okay, so this is a strange one. It's General Raiho of the Ice Barrier. So the Ice Barrier deck, I think, is the second strongest archetype to get support from Terminal Revenge. Ritual Beasts are doing the best so far, but I think that Ice Barrier is also really scary. I actually decided to play the deck this past weekend at locals. I did manage to go undefeated though. To be fair, I'm pretty sure I just got really lucky and people didn't really know what the cards did. Anyways, Raiho is a surprisingly strong Floodgate monster that's really difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. It's a Floodgate monster that says that your opponent has to discard a card when they activate a monster effect on the field, or else that effect is negated. So with this card, a lot of decks are forced to out it in order to play the game, or else they're going to run out of cards in hand. The other cool thing is that if you can bring it out when your opponent has no cards in hand, then they just can't use effects at all. Now with this card, it does have several different printings. It was in the Ice Barrier structure deck and then Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1 as well, so just finding a copy to use should be really easy. However, the card has two different higher rarity printings that are currently trending. We have the Secret Rares from Hidden Arsenal 4 coming in at $15 each at the time I'm making this video, with very few quantities available on the market, while the DT printing is around $9 to $10 each. Now this is another case where it's only the highest rarity printing of the card that has gone up, so if you don't mind just playing the lower rarities that are under $1 each, now is a great time to offload those higher end versions for a bit more value. Speaking of weird ones, this is a card I don't think I'd ever heard of before today. It's called Locomotion R Genix. So this is of course a Genix synchro monster. It's a level 9 that requires the tuner to be a Genix monster and the non-tuner to be a dark monster. One thing I remember about Genix is that a lot of the synchros, they have different requirements or benefits to using certain attributes for the non-tuners. Of course, Genix did get a decent buff with the new Genix cards that came out in Terminal Revenge, primarily the Link 1 monster that basically grants you an infinite number of normal summons. Anyways, Locomotion is a really cool card because when it's synchro summoned, you take control of an opponent's face-up monster with the highest level. Now there's two really cool things about that. One is that this card's effect doesn't target, so even if your opponent tries to do something, you still get to take control of whatever is left afterwards. And then also that effect isn't a once per turn, so if you're able to really spam out monsters and make multiples of this card, you could basically take your opponent's entire board. Now of course I don't think Genix are exactly meta relevant. I don't think I've seen anyone really that excited to play the deck, and I haven't seen any lists that have like topped regionals come up online, so this does seem like more of a play at just the local level. But nevertheless, Locomotion is trending on the market right now. It has just two different printings, with the Secret Rares from Hidden Arsenal 3 coming in at $4 to $5, while the DT printing is about $10. Interestingly enough, this card wasn't printed in Terminal Revenge itself, nor was it in Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1, so this card is going to be a bit more difficult to find than other cards from the Terminal Revenge themes. This card was definitely easy to overlook before, so check out your holo bulk to see if you might have some unexpected value in there. This is one that feels random. It's Boral Furious Dragon. Now this card is a fusion monster that requires 2 dark dragons as material. Now on the field it has a quick effect where you can target one of your monsters and a card your opponent controls and then destroy them. This is of course a super polymerization target. The only thing that I'm not 100% sure about is exactly what this card is being sided for. Super Poly is theoretically a Yubel card, right? As they're able to search for it, so I can see why Super Poly targets would be more in demand now as Yubel is getting a ton of support. However, as for implications in the current format, I can only really think of really specific timings against Branded for where this card might be useful in the context of today's game. If you do know exactly what situation this card is being used for, let us know down in the comment section. Now this is a card that has actually been on a slight upward trend for a while. It's historically pretty cheap, only being about $1 or $2, but now this card is actually up to $5 to $6 a piece. It does make sense, however, as the card only has one ultra rare printing from the Rocket Revolt structure deck, which came out back in 2019, so a bit more of a difficult card to find if you don't already own one. If you are planning on playing Yubel this format, or if you just really like Super Poly as a tech card and you want to have this card in your arsenal, $5 isn't a massive price to pay for a one-of, so I would go ahead and make sure that you own one. On the flip side though, this is a good card to move if you're sitting on a few extra copies, since basically any reprint for this card will instantly destroy this card's value. And finally, the last card we're talking about for today is Red Lotus King Flame Crime. This card is a level 3 Fire Fiend monster that can special summon itself out of your hand if you control a Fiend Tuner monster, or if your opponent controls a special summoned monster. If you use it as a synchro material, you can send a normal trap from your deck to the graveyard, and it also has a burn effect on special summon as well. This card is actually an important new card for the Red Dragon Archfiend deck. Before this card, they did kind of struggle a bit to get non-tuners onto the board, relying very heavily on Bone Archfiend, but Red Lotus King is a good card to run alongside it. Of course, the Red Dragon Archfiend deck isn't too competitive or meta viable or anything like that, but since you can basically build the deck with just 3 of the structure deck, it's a popular deck with a lot of casual players at the local level. Now, Lotus King was actually one of the short printed cards in Terminal Revenge. It's pretty difficult to pull or find. Early on when Terminal Revenge came out, this card was only a $3 to $4 card. However, just over the past few days, this card has shot up to now being a solid $15 each. Part of this is definitely a lack of availability, and also part of it is just a lack of overall value in the set outside of Phantom of Yubel and the QCRs, so unfortunately if you want to play Red Dragon Archfiends and run this card, you might just have to suck it up and pick up a set of it. As a brand new card, I don't expect this card to go down in price very much or get reprinted anytime soon, so it's definitely something to be aware of moving forward. Alright guys, that is all I have for today's episode. Definitely some interesting rogue decks that are coming up here, mostly because of Terminal Revenge. Of course, we should have more information about the Infinite Forbidden coming soon, and as always, the big thing is going to be that ban list and whether or not that's actually going to drop before the NAWCQ, because that's definitely going to have a massive impact, not only on the format, but on the market as well. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.